Okay. Uh, so would you please begin, Babette?
I'd be delighted. Taking snuff was considered an uncouth habit, but Dowlett's sister, Franny Mossy, Auntie Franny, also wanted to take it. She just didn't want anyone to know about it. So she concealed her snuff in a dainty silver bottle and no one suspected. Mara once inadvertently even tried her uncle's chewing tobacco. Seeing what she thought was a nice bar of chocolate lying on the table, she and her cousins bit off some. It tasted so bitter that the children spat it out and chuckled over their mistake. Mara liked to explore the Royal Hotel. It had a mysterious attic upstairs, full of brass and copper cooking utensils, and a stable at the back for cows and buffaloes, behind which were two horse stables. I love Domino's, said Mara. We didn't have any riding horses at my grandmother's place, but there were cows and one water buffalo, which was kept next to a wall at the back by a platform. Since we didn't have any horses, every day for a while I climbed on top of the buffalo by standing on the platform and then hopping on her. At least I got to ride a buffalo. She never bucked, but quietly went on chewing her fodder. I would sit on her back for a long time and finally jumped down to play in the garden with my cousin. One day, however, Mara came in the house scratching her head. Grandmother called her near and said, "Let me look at your hair." She found several large flat lice that only buffaloes have. "Where have you been that you've got these things on your head?" Mara confessed that she had been near the buffalo, but she did not tell Granny that she had been on it. Grandmama scolded her, saying, "Don't go near that buffalo again." Then she combed Mara's hair every day with a fine-tooth comb to remove any remaining lice on their eggs. Fortunately, the lice had not been on Mara's head long enough to multiply. Because of her fondness for the outdoors, green became Mara's favorite color. As a child, she often watched Uncle Dinshaw work in his garden. He cultivated many different varieties of plants, flowers, and rose bushes. The roses were in clay pots, and he would weed and trim one section every morning. Then, after giving some last minute instructions to the garden boys, he would hop on his bicycle and pedal off to Ardashir's soda factory. Grandfather Sorab woke every morning at 4 a.m. and prepared tea for Mara and Peroja when they got up. His sole possessions and important documents were kept in a large wooden box at the foot of his bed. On the weekends, if they heard Grandpa coming up the steps with his keys, they would run to follow him, knowing he was about to open his big trunk where candy was kept for them. They would tug at him, begging, "Give us a sweet, Grandfather. We want sweets." "All right," he would say in a kind voice, "but let me go first." The children also loved to frolic on his bed and grab the pomegranates from a tree outside his window. Grandfather did not let them climb the taller trees in the compound. Only when he went for his nap were they free to do as they pleased. Quietly, they tiptoed inside to see whether he was sound asleep. If he was, they would watch him a little as he slept, giggling as his white beard and mustache bobbed up and down. His lips, too, puckered in and out while he snored away. Then, scampering outside, they would climb trees and play with abandon. Once, rumors were circulating that a gang of thieves was vandalizing the area. The bandits would park a bullock cart on the road and pretend to be villagers passing through town. The Royal Hotel was situated right on the road, a prime target for anyone with malicious intentions. One night, Perosia heard a rattle at the front door. She scrambled out of the big double bed she shared with Mehera and ran to their mother's room. Mehera woke up and she too scurried to Dowlett's room. Dowlett too had heard the noise. Frightened, all three went to grandfather and woke him. Then, following grandfather, with his flowing white beard and kerosene lantern held high, they trooped to the front door in their long night dresses. But when they opened the front door, no one was there. Mehera, years later, found the whole episode comical and related the scene to Baba. Mehera liked to sleep late, but because of the prediction of a fortune teller, Dowlett would not even scold her about it. It happened that an Iraqi youth in Pune knew how to read palms. He came to the Royal Hotel and read Perosia's palm first in grandmother's prayer room. Then it was Mehera's turn. Mehera did not remember everything that he said, but one thing stuck in her mind. He predicted to Dowlett that she would be greatly benefited through her youngest daughter. From that time onwards, mother was extra nice to me. Perhaps Mehera speculated because her son had died and she had visions of staying with me in my house after I married. After this, Dowlett would usually take Mehera's side in any dispute. The young Irani's prediction did prove correct, of course, through Mehera's close connection with Meher Baba. Were you spiritually minded as a child? The author asked Mehera. I was very materially minded, Mehera replied. I liked all the best clothes and the best things to eat. Then to leave all that for Baba is something. If you are simple in your tastes from the first and don't care for anything, and then come to Baba, it is not a sacrifice. It is not a difficult thing to do. I loved good food. Always I had to have meat or chicken with my meal. We had chicken or duck for dinner practically every day. Did you ever think of Zoroaster as a child? I didn't even say my prayers, much less think of Zoroaster. My sister tried to coax me. The prayers were in Gujarati, and she would say, here's a nice short one for you to say. Did you ever go to the fire temple when you were little? Did your mother take you? We were usually traveling in the forest when I was small, so there was no Agyari fire temple around. When we lived in Pune, when I was 10 or 11, we would go if anyone called us for a wedding or thread ceremony. We didn't go very often or regularly. Mehera also went to the fire temple once or twice on All Souls Day, where there would be rows of dahlias in vases from Uncle Dinshaw's garden. Several years before, while Jongir was still alive, Piroja's sacred thread, or Navjot ceremony, had been held at the fire temple. The side note says, the Navjot, new light, is a confirmation ceremony done for Zoroastrian children after they reach 7 years old. Jahangir had arranged it on a grand scale, inviting many of his friends and colleagues for a feast. It was almost like a wedding, Mehera reflected. However, when Mehera turned 9, her Navjot was just the opposite.
Ah, that's interesting. We'll find out how.
Mhm.
Do you want to pick up, Deb?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Okay. When a dear one dies, it is customary among Zoroastrians to feed the poor and perform charitable acts in the departed one's name to help that person's soul. Ever since Jahangir had died, Dalat had wished to do something in his honor. She had heard that it was auspicious and good for the departed soul if a Navjot ceremony was held on the anniversary of the person's death. So on the very day, a year after her father died, Mehera's Navjot was held. It was at the Pune Fire Temple, but it was not an elaborate event. Only a few guests were invited. The priest put a new sadra on Mehera and tied the sacred kusti around her waist as he recited a prayer. The Zoroastrian traditionally performed the same ritual every morning, and Mehera continued this practice until she was 16 and came to Baba. There's a side note here. The kusti, or sacred thread, is meant to symbolically tie the person to God.
Oh, that's why they call it a thread ceremony.
Yeah. In addition, every year after that, on the anniversary of Jahangir's death, Dalat hosted a feast at the fire temple for the entire Zoroastrian community and hundreds of Puna's poor. Also in Jahangir's name, Dalat sponsored the sons of Zoroastrian priests who wished to study and be trained in the priesthood. As a result, one night when Mehera was around 10, she, her mother, and sister went to the fire temple, escorted by the priest himself. A boy came dressed in white. He started praying to show us that he knew his prayers by heart from first to last. It got later and later, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. I still remember being so tired. We were too so happy when it ended and we could go home. In the mornings, Mehera would wake at 3 a.m. and hear her mother praying in the prayer room. Sometimes Dalat would weep softly over the death of her husband. Drowsily, Mehera would fall back asleep. Dalat would come in and rest for a while, but she would be up early to resume her prayers. When Jahangir died, it was discovered that he owned various properties, railroad shares, and other stock of which Dalat was unaware. Still grieving over her husband's death, Dalat did not take an active interest in her financial affairs. So her sister Khorshed's son-in-law was asked to put her affairs in order. Instead of informing her of the true situation, the young man had Dalat execute an agreement giving one of the larger properties to Khorshed. When asked why he acted so duplicitous, can you help me out with this word here?
Duplicitously.
There you go. Thank you. Mehera surmised, these people who weren't at all well-to-do saw our land and got the idea to acquire part of it. Gradually, the family prospered and they built a beautiful home. Aunt Khorshid acquired even more land. She grew vegetables, kept cows and buffaloes, and made money selling milk. She became distant from her sister, and Mehera admitted we didn't like her very much. And here's a little aside here, note. Aunt Khurshid never met Meher Baba. She died a few years later before Dalat came in contact with Baba's contact. Along with the papers, Aunt Khurshid's son-in-law had also brought back 2 of Jahangir's trunks. They were shaped to fit on the back of a camel and contained his personal belongings. One day, Mehera and her mother went through them and found a few photographs.
Oh,
Would you like to
um,
quit there?
yeah, you can quit. How about Marcia? Do you want to read anything?
Okay, hold on. I didn't comb my hair today. I
That's
don't
okay.
have
You
the,
can stay without a video.
okay. I have to make it bigger so I can see it. I'm on a cell phone.
Oh, let me see if I can make it bigger.
No, I can see it now, but I have to move it. Yeah, okay. And I have to move your head. Okay, let me see. Mara idly picked up one and looked at it, and then Dawat showed her another, a group photo taken at the Sakur Club on some occasion. Dulat was seated in front, but since Janjagir was so tall, he was standing in the back row. Okay. Dawar pointed to a Western woman standing next to him. See this woman, she said. I used to be so jealous of her. She was the most beautiful woman in Sakur. She had a fine bearing, impeccable manners, and charming way of speaking. Although she was married, every time your father came to the club, she sauntered up to him, smiled sweetly, and said, "Hello, Mr. Irani." She was always near your father, talking with him, sitting next to him. At first, I noticed it was only once or twice, but then it began happening every time we went into the club. Dalat began to cry. I was very foolish to be, okay, it's moving. I was very foolish to be jealous of her. Your father was only being courteous and civil. He was not the philandering sort. He was never like that. He was always home in the evenings with his family playing his sitar. Dolar shed more tears and remorse for having doubted her father's virtue. Having been duped once in managing Jen's estate, Dulat was determined not to be so again. She went to Bombay to consult with a friend of Jen's. How do you pronounce it so I do correctly his name?
Jahangir.
Jahangir, who had managed all his affairs, a Parsi lawyer named Mr. Captain. But since she did not know anything about business, she was not quite sure what to do. So she consulted her brother, Colonel Marwan Irani, and afterwards always followed his advice. Marwan Irani, Dulat's younger brother by 2 years, was the chief surgeon in a large military hospital in Aden, where hundreds of soldiers were sent for treatment during World War I. He was the first Zoroastrian to be made a colonel by the British, and because of his high position, he was greatly respected in Pune. Dolat loved young Merwin more than any of her other brothers and sisters, and even sent servants to Aden to cook for him. He was also grandmother Shireen's favorite. Merwin too cared deeply about his sister. One of my mother's brothers, this uncle, had the most love for my mother, said Mara. He loved my father also. My father was an officer who loved and appreciated a good education. At that time, Iranians, I have to find where I went, were not highly educated. The few who were admired each other. It was rare for an Irani to be an officer, and my uncle had love and respect for my father. In fact, they were good friends, like Janjadgir. Colonel Irani always dressed in the latest Western fashion. I'm going to stop reading now because it's hard for me. Thank
Okay.
you. Jai Baba.
Thank you. Who would like to take over? Meher?
Yeah, I want to read.
Mhm. Go
When
ahead.
when Jahangir died, the colonel felt devastated. He took special leave to return to India and comfort his sister. And when they met, they wept on Daulat's shoulder. A front bedroom was kept for him for whenever he visited from Aden, and
Before we leave this page, can you read the side note?
Mehra's only memory of World War I came from seeing a young Parsi cycle past their house every day. One day, when he did not ride past, she asked what had become of him and was told that he had been drafted for the war.
Okay. So a front bedroom was kept for him whenever he visited from Aden
And stayed a few months. In it were a writing table and a sturdy cupboard that no one else used. While Daulat and the girls were at the Royal Hotel, the colonel came for Jahangir's funeral and again 3 years later when Mehera was 11. Mehera remembered the colonel as a handsome man with attractive features, of medium height. He was an honest, good-natured and intelligent person, a devout Zoroastrian, studious and fluent in Persian. He brought the girls storybooks to improve their English and was fond of taking photos, now lost, of the children in the garden. Now that Daulat was seeing to her financial affairs, she sometimes had to go to Bombay on business, and she also brought back books as presents. One of Mehra's favorites was called Bunny Brothers. She also enjoyed a book of Shakespeare for children and Real Ivanhoe. But she had no interest in Rudyard Kipling, a popular author then, and never read him. Years later at Meherazad, at Mehra's suggestion, a copy of Bunny Brothers was procured and read to Baba. While they were staying at the Royal Hotel, another of Daulat's brothers, Rusi, who was studying to be an engineer, got married. Mehera and Firoja accompanied their mother to the wedding. Their mother chose the saris they should wear, and Firoja accepted hers without a murmur of discontent. But when Daulat showed Mehera the sari she had chosen for her, a simple one of georgette cloth with a plain border, Mehera thought only, though only 8, was not happy. The sari is too plain, she protested. I want that Benares sari all embroidered in gold. It's too heavy for you, her mother replied. You're too young to wear such a sari. Mehera would not listen, and her mother had to relent to get her to attend the wedding. I was very particular about wearing the best, the shiniest, the fanciest sari, and having the latest hairstyle. My school friends will all be there and see me. I thought. I was rather vain as a child. Piroja did not care about such things, but I always did. She was simple in her tastes. Whatever mother gave her, she would wear. Mehra chuckled. Ironically, clothes were very important to me. And then I joined the ashram. This was the first traditional Irani wedding that Mehra had ever attended. It began with the women assembling separately inside a large hall where they embraced everyone. The men stood outside listening to a band playing. Then came the ceremony, with the 7 elders surrounding the bride with candles and performing the various rituals. Afterwards, guests were served a feast at long tables. The children, as usual, ate first, When they were done, the adults sat down. Banana leaves, whose stems had been stamped down to flatten them into plates, were filled by bearers circulating with platters of delicacies. As Mehera was eating and talking with their sister, cousins, and friends, she glanced up and saw a young man smiling at her. She looked down. Hurriedly at her plate, feeling shy, but then thought that perhaps it was only her imagination. I wanted to look again and make sure. I looked up, and again he smiled at me. I did not know who he was or why he was smiling. I got so embarrassed and felt so awkward. Who is he? When I went home, I forgot about it. All the Mehra did not recognize him. The boy was her own cousin, the son of the paternal uncle, Nosherwan Irani from Pune. Later, the boy would mention Mehera's name to his relatives as a girl he wanted to marry. Sometimes, when Daulat went to Bombay, she took the girls with her. When Mehera was about 10, she remembered visiting Victoria Gardens there and seeing a huge turtle. Around this time, her mother also took the girls and their cousins to Mahabaleshwar, a popular hill station where they stayed in the Race View Hotel. Here, the days were filled with playing and outings, often to Yena Lake. They had the use of a small kitchen, and Kasim, the cook, was with them to prepare the meals. But he drove Daulat mad with the accounts. Just buy whatever you need, she would say irritably, and don't pester me with such petty amounts. One day, when Daulat was out for a walk, she saw a bungalow for sale. She contacted the estate agent and arranged to buy it, thinking it would be pleasant to spend their summers in the cool of Mahabaleshwar in a place of their own. It was a large property called Mint House, and previously owned by Europeans who had left the country. Besides the main house, there were two small cottages, Cossey Cottage and the Beehive. Dawlat rented out Mike House and used the income for the property's upkeeping. Mehra remembered a Maharaja and Maharani who came to stay once, and all of them going to the main house to meet the family. Mehra found the Maharani dressed in an attractive green sari to be an amiable, unaffected woman. On 16th October 1935, during his seclusion in the Tiger Valley cave Panchgani, Meher Baba was driven to Mahabaleshwar and walked around the grounds of Might House. Daulat and the girls stayed at Cozy Cottage twice and once at the Beehive. There was no running water, and since the property was situated on a hill, water had to be brought up from a nearby well in a tank drawn by oxen. Qasim became the manager of the bungalows. Qasim was an orphan whom Jahangir had employed since Qasim was a teenager, years before Mehra was born. After Jahangir's death, however, Dawlat did not wish to retain any male servants. The Goanese cook was let go, but Qasim refused to leave. He begged and pleaded with Dawlat not to fire him, pointing out how devoted he had been to his former master, which was true. Dawlat decided to try him out in the kitchen, but at the Royal Hotel, grandmother Shireen preferred to do the cooking herself, and Qasim was just in the way. The new arrangement at Mahabaleshwar was a good solution, and Qasim was pleased. Before leaving for his new post, he asked Daulat for a photograph of Jahangir, something Muslims never do, and she presented him with one.
Thank you. I'll take over. Moreover, Besides being the manager, Kasim volunteered to be both cook and butler. Whenever the family came to Mahabaleshwar, he would change into a uniform before dinner and serve what he himself had cooked. Then he would stand at attention in the dining room while they ate, filling them in on the local gossip. Who was living in which bungalow, what business they were in, how many children they had, and so on. Or asking, did you like the food? Was it too spicy? Years later, Kasim had a son, Daoud, for whom he wanted to find employment. In 1943, he went to Nasik, where Paroja hired his son. There, Kasim came to know about Meher Baba and that Mehra was staying with Baba at Valley View in Mahabaleshwar. So he went to the Men Mandali's residence where he met Baba and explained that he had looked after Mehra when she was a child. He asked whether he could see her again. Baba said he could, but from a distance, but that he was not to speak to her. Mehra was told about Kasim coming to see her and that she should not be nervous about greeting him, as it was Baba's wish. Returning from a walk, she saw him standing by the roadside. Kasim salamed, and Mehra returned his salute by folding her hands to him before she walked on. Later, Baba remarked that Kasim was a sincere and admirable person. This is the Edward Hotel where they stayed. And it's, I guess it's the Royal Hotel in Pune. It's no longer there. And this is Baba John. And this is now a chapter 4 called The White Horse. I can continue unless somebody wants to pick up. Okay. In 1918, when Mehra was 11, her life changed again. She met someone who would be instrumental in helping her fulfill her destiny. Someone glorious, the perfect master, Hazrat Babajan. Babajan was always seated under the same neem tree in the camp cantonment area of Pune, where her tomb is now located. And during the years that they were boarders at the convent school, Mehra and her sister passed Babajan whenever they went to Aunt Khorshid's house on Main Street. But, Mehra said, we had no idea she was a perfect master or what even a perfect master was. No Zoroastrians followed her. We thought she was an old woman from Persia. Sometimes Paroja had even joined the other children in throwing stones at Babajan on the road. After moving to the Royal Hotel, they never passed that way. One day, at noon recess, while Mehra was skipping rope with some European girls, a Parsi girl named Zina Gariba approached her. Mehra knew her only slightly. She had been at her house once, but the girl was a year younger and in a lower grade. Nonetheless, Mehra stopped playing when Zina came near. Do you know about Baba John? Zina asked in a whisper. Baba John is so great. She will give us whatever we want. We ask for. Come on, we'll go and ask her for something. Mehra was willing to go with Zina, but she worried that they would be getting back late to school. Baba John sits under a neem tree, which is far away. Will we make it back in time? She asked. The bell for the study hall will go off before we can get back. Our teacher will scold us if we're late. Zena assured her they would be back in time. Baba John is very near today. She's just around the corner. Zena had seen her there on her way back from home, where she had gone to lunch. The girls held each other's hand and ran to Baba John. I was very surprised when we turned the corner that Baba John was seated behind the convent wall. She was just behind the church under a large tree, no longer there, by a shallow drainage ditch of clean sand. This was unusual, as she never left her seat. One of her legs was up and she was leaning on it, her fist resting on her cheek, with her back turned to them. You go first, Zena said. Eugene, would you like to pick up?
Mehera, being shy, hesitated. No, you go first. Besides, what would she ask for? She did not know. Ask to come out first in class, Zena suggested. Ask her to make you highly educated. Ask for a good education and you'll get it. I didn't find that very attractive, Mehera noted. I never cared for coming out first. As long as I passed my exams and went on to the next class, that's all I cared about. Anyway, I was not a bright student, so I started to think about what to ask for. I have everything, a nice home, good food. What else was there to want? Meanwhile, Zena took a few steps towards Baba John and knelt in front of her. She asked for something, and Baba John nodded. Zena must have had something in mind to ask for, Mehera guessed. I never asked her what she asked for, and she never asked me. I still hadn't thought of what to say. Zena came back, and Mehera went quietly and knelt before the perfect master. Baba John looked at her sweetly, smiled slightly, and asked, Kia beta? What is it, child? Mehera said softly in Urdu and Hindustani, I've come to ask you for something, but now I don't remember what it is. She looked at Baba John. She did not know what to say. Baba John looked away, giving her time to think. Mehera felt desperate. She too looked away. And at that moment, she caught sight of a horse and Tonga at a nearby stand. A riding horse. Yes, that was it. A nice riding horse. After her father's death, her mother had never kept horses. Daulat did not like the idea of keeping so many servants and grooms to look after them, preferring a simple, uncomplicated life. Baba John turned towards her, and Mehera said, Baba John, I want a horse. Baba John smiled agreeably. She turned her head, looked up at the sky, and nodded her head. Baba John never spoke much, and when she did, it was very softly. She always spoke in Urdu, which Mehera could follow a bit from Qasim's rudimentary lessons. Tina, do you mind scrolling the
So
guess
you're right
up.
here. You're right there.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so she tried to listen, but she could catch only a few words. It will be a very beautiful one, Baba John said. All the world will look at him. All the world will love him. Mehera heard only that much. It was enough. I was thrilled. My, I thought, I'll have a very beautiful horse. When I ride him, everyone will admire him. Baba John, of course, was referring to the white horse avatar, Meher Baba, whom she had anointed with a kiss to the forehead 5 years before. After saying a few more things, which Mehera could not hear, Baba John turned again to her and smiled. Acha, mera beta jao. All right, my child, you may leave now. Mehera had not received any definite answer or promise of, yes, you will get what you want. Nevertheless, she felt reassured. She folded her hands and said, yes, Baba John, and got up to leave. There's a side note saying Meher Baba had opened a toddy shop in Kasba Path. In August 1918, but Mehera never frequented that section of Pune.
Interesting. Deb, would you like to read the next page?
Yes, sorry, my internet dropped earlier and I couldn't listen for a while.
Oh.
So I got back on. I missed a couple pages. Okay, so the top of page 43, right?
Let's see. 43, yes.
Okay. I didn't ask for anything else as I was shy. I was in a hurry to leave, otherwise we would be late for school and our teacher would make us stay late and write some lines. The two girls hurried back to school in time for class. Excuse me. Mehera never saw Babajan sitting behind the convent school again, and she surmised later that Babajan must have come that day just for her. In attending school, keeping up with her studies, and playing at the Royal Hotel, Mehera completely forgot what had transpired that day. After all, she had not taken it too seriously. But 4 to 6 months later, her mother was out shopping in her carriage when she noticed a crowd gathered on the road. She had the carriage stopped and inquired what was going on. Leaning out, she saw the head of a beautiful milk white horse. Feeling somehow drawn to it, she got down. This horse is pure white, she said to herself, is like a good spirit, symbolizing purity, a good soul, an omen of luck and good fortune. Dalat pushed her way to the person holding the horse and asked about it. The person said he was taking it to the market to be sold. Dalat, who normally would never think of buying a horse, asked the price and offered to buy it on the spot. Dan accepted her offer, and the horse was brought to their home and tied in the stable. That's pretty unusual that they didn't do any bartering, I'd say.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. That day, Mehera came home from school feeling tired from the long walk. She washed her face and hands, and Aunt Dalat.
I thought Dalat was her mother.
Yeah, it says Aunt Dalat. That's what I'm confused. Maybe it means her mother gave her a light snack on the kitchen veranda, because I can't think that Mehera had an aunt named Dalat too.
Yeah, and it repeats it down here. But
Huh.
I don't
Does
know.
anybody else remember there being an Aunt Delot? I do not.
No.
Okay. Then she went out to play in the garden as usual with her cousins. Oh, I forget how to pronounce the first
Behram.
name.
Behram.
Mehera and Paroja and her sister. They started a game of gilli danda on the broad driveway, and soon the four of them began arguing. Mehera's mother had gone out again and was not home. Aha. But Aunt Delot remembered about the horse and came to tell her. Mehera, she called, your mother has bought a horse for you today. Okay, so I guess there is an Aunt Delot also that I had forgotten about. Mehera stopped arguing and laughed. You're pulling my leg, Auntie. Mother would never buy me a horse, never. It can't be, don't tease me. Come on, she said to her playmates, let's finish the game. They started playing again and her aunt went back inside. After a few minutes during a lull in the game, Aunt Delot came out again and said to Mehera, I'm not pulling your leg, dear. If you don't believe me, look in the table. Go and see for yourself. Aunt Delot seemed so serious that cousin Paroja said, come on, let's go look. They ran around the house to the stables, and Mehera could not believe her eyes. It was a big, white, well-fed, strong horse in our stable. There was a big, white, well-fed, strong horse in our stable. It was snow white with a pink nose, not a speck of any other color. One would think the horse was an albino, but one eye was blue and the other was jet black. It was so beautiful. Side note, Mehera theorized later that the two colors of the horse's eyes symbolized the east and the west. I said, what on earth made my mother buy this beautiful horse? And next page.
Meher, would you take over?
You mean me, right, Meher?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. The horse was so good looking, it looked like a statue. I kept staring at him. He was not an ordinary quiet animal, but very spirited. And the more spirited a horse, the better I liked it. He put his head to one side. I kept admiring him. I had never expected this kind of horse. When Daulat came home, Mehera told her how lovely the horse was. Did you like it? Her mother asked. Very much, Mehera replied. How did you happen to buy it? Her mother then told her what had happened on the road, and a groom from Madras was hired to look after the animal. I could not wait to ride it, said Mehera. I never stopped to think that one must not ride a strange horse which does not know you and is likely to throw you. I just wanted to get on it. I knew that the grown-ups would not allow me to ride it. So after 2 days, I quietly went to the storeroom where the saddle and reins were kept in gunny sacks from my father's time. I had seen them there before. I quickly took them out and gave them to the groom, instructing him, clean these well and saddle the horse. I brought the bridle and bit. The man assumed I had permission from my mother to ride the horse. He did not know I was doing it on the sly. He saddled the horse and brought it outside. The horse was happy to be out of the stable. He was prancing about, wanting to have his exercise. I wasn't afraid. I did not even consider that he might throw me. I was determined to ride him. Father had taught me to ride when I was 6, though I hadn't ridden again since he died. The groom held my knee and gave me a lift onto the tallish animal. I did not ride by the front garden. Uh, Okay, I
Can
think
you find it? Did you lose your place?
Yeah, I think the groom held my knee and gave it a lift and polish animal. I did not ride by front garden of the house. I was very cunning. After all, I did not want to get caught. I went around the field, then around the front to the main road. But some of the elders saw me. They came running from the veranda shouting, Arey, no Mehera, come back. Don't ride that horse. He is going to throw you. He's a very high strung animal. He's new. Get down. It's all right, I shouted back. I'm going to ride him. He is obeying the rein. I am not going to come back. The horse was quite good and did not throw me. He liked being out of the stable. He gave me a quick walk. I guided him to the bridle path of Bun Gardens. There were no buses or cars then, as this was 1918 and lovely sand had been put on the paths. I had seen European ladies and gentlemen using the same bridle paths during my Sunday outings in the park. My mouth always watered to see them riding. How lovely they can ride. That thought had always passed through my mind. Now that I had my own horse, I thought I too must ride on those paths. I guided the horse and centered on the path. We came home safe and sound. When the elders saw that I was okay, they did not object to my riding the horse. But I had no time after that. I rode it only 2 or 3 times, not more, because I had to go to school and learn piano also.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll stop here. Let's see, we're on page 45, right?
Right. Yes.
Okay. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to stop sharing. And I hope you will come to my concert tonight, 7 o'clock in Baba Zoom. And I'll be
Thank you,
playing
Gina.
the songs that Baba listened to, which David Fenster has listed in the back of the book, Mehera-Meher